There are a lot of reasons narcissistic abuse victims try to withdraw or hide their emotions. One of which is that they don't want to get judged for their emotional reactions. It's tough to feel a whirlwind of feelings and worry that others might see you as dramatic or overreacting. This fear can lead to some strange emotional responses, like laughing at something silly one moment and crying over a minor comment the next. Today we'll explore these unusual reactions, looking at why they happen and what they mean. Are you ready for number 1? Freezing in decision-making. When you've been through narcissistic abuse, even the smallest decisions can feel like giant, risky moves. You might find yourself freezing up, stuck in an endless loop of "what if I mess up?" or "will they be mad at me for this?" Psychologists explain this reaction as part of the fight, flight, freeze response, where your brain goes into survival mode because it's wired to expect criticism or punishment from past experiences. Dr. Judith Herman, a trauma expert, says that abuse victims can become so fearful of making mistakes that they stay trapped in a state of indecision. In other words, it's like your mind's alarm system is so sensitive that even picking a flavor of ice cream can feel like life or death, because you've learned to expect judgment no matter what you choose. Let's talk about number 2. Nervous laughter. Nervous laughter is like your brain's quick fix for uncomfortable moments. You might laugh when someone says something hurtful, not because it's funny, but because it's your way of deflecting pain or tension. Dr. Judith Orloff, a psychiatrist specializing in emotional resilience, explains that people often use laughter as a defense, saying, "Laughter can act as a protective barrier for emotions we're not ready to face." For someone who's been through narcissistic abuse, this reaction becomes almost automatic. Laughing can feel safer than showing sadness or anger, especially if you've learned that showing vulnerability will just be used against you. It's your brain's way of saying, "I'm fine," even when you're not. Let's move on to number 3. Flinching at physical touch. Flinching at even a gentle touch is something your nervous system might do when it's been on high alert for too long, kind of like your body's danger radar going off without warning. If you've experienced narcissistic abuse, your brain may have learned to see touch, even harmless touch, as a possible threat. Dr. Peter Levine, a trauma expert, explains that the body holds onto trauma long after the mind might think it's safe. So, this flinch is a startle reflex, a reaction from deep down in your nervous system that's ready to protect you. It's not that you want to pull away from people, it's more like your body has been wired to guard against anything it associates with harm. Now, let's continue to number 4. Exaggerated startle response. An exaggerated startle response, jumping at sudden sounds or movements, is like your body's alarm system being set to extra sensitive. If you've been through narcissistic abuse, your nervous system might be stuck in survival mode, always on guard. Trauma expert Dr. Bessel van der Kolk explains that after prolonged stress, the body keeps the score, meaning it holds on to that tension and reacts as if danger is still nearby. So even a door slamming or someone moving too quickly can make you flinch or feel jumpy. It's not that you're overreacting, it's your body's way of staying ready to protect you, even when you don't need it. You shouldn't miss number 5. Hypersensitivity to tone of voice. When you're hypersensitive to someone's tone of voice, it's like you're constantly on a mission to find hidden messages in their words. This reaction often comes from experiencing narcissistic abuse, where you've learned to read between the lines, to anticipate anger, judgment, or criticism. According to psychologist Dr. Ramani Dovasala, people who've been through this kind of abuse become highly tuned to subtle cues, like tone or inflection, because they are essential for survival. Your brain starts thinking, is there anger behind that calm voice? Is there sarcasm hiding in that sweetness? You're not overreacting. It's just your brain trying to keep you safe by analyzing every sound for possible threats, even when there might not be any. Are you still up for number 6? Unexplained irritability. Unexplained irritability, feeling snappy or frustrated over small things, is often your mind's way of saying, "I'm emotionally worn out." If you've been through narcissistic abuse, you're likely dealing with constant stress and emotional exhaustion, which can leave you with a shorter fuse. Therapist Dr. Shari Steins explains that emotional abuse drains your mental energy, so little things can start to feel like big irritants. This reaction isn't because you're just moody, it's that your emotional reserves are depleted, making it harder to stay calm. Your mind and body are so used to being in defense mode that they react quickly, sometimes harshly, even when it's not needed. It's like all your emotional energy has been spent on surviving, leaving little left for patience. Let's keep it moving to number 7. Nervous body language. Nervous body language, like fidgeting, crossing your arms, or hiding your hands, often shows up when you feel vulnerable or on edge, especially if you've experienced narcissistic abuse. This body language is like a silent shield, a way of saying, "I'm protecting myself," even if you don't realize it. Dr. Joe Navarro, a former FBI agent and body language expert, explains that we often self-soothe by touching or hiding parts of our body when we feel unsafe. These gestures can be an unconscious reaction to feeling exposed, like your body's way of creating a barrier. It's a subtle, physical way to try to feel secure, especially in situations where you might fear judgment or rejection. So, your body tries to protect you by closing off or keeping itself small, signaling a need for safety. Here comes number 8. Feeling triggered by praise. When you're a victim of narcissistic abuse, praise can feel like a trap rather than a compliment. You've been conditioned to think that any kindness comes with strings attached. Narcissists often use praise as a form of manipulation. They'll build you up just to knock you down later. So naturally, you start to feel suspicious of anything nice that's said to you. Psychologist Dr. Ramani Durvasula explains that for people who've dealt with narcissistic abuse, compliments often feel like bait rather than genuine appreciation. Instead of making you feel good, praise makes you brace yourself, wondering, what's the catch? Moving on to number 9. Unexplained outbursts or emotional flooding. If you've gone through narcissistic abuse, you might find yourself calm one second, then bursting into tears or feeling a rush of anger the next. And honestly, it can feel baffling. This is known as emotional flooding, where all those suppressed feelings you've held down for so long come rushing out in a single moment. Dr. Judith Orloff, a psychiatrist and expert in trauma, explains that emotional flooding often happens when triggers tap into deep wells of unresolved pain. With a narcissist, you learn to bury your true feelings just to survive. But when something small reminds you of that hurt, all of the emotions come flooding back at once. It's like shaking a bottle of soda. You keep the cap on for as long as possible. But one tiny shake too many, and everything just explodes. Finally, we're down to number 10, stammering or struggling to find words. If you've experienced narcissistic abuse, you might find it hard to express your feelings. You may stammer or struggle to find the right words when you try to talk. This happens because the constant criticism from your abuser has made you doubt yourself. Life coach Melody Beatty says, "You are not a mistake." But after being told you're wrong for so long, it can feel like your thoughts are all jumbled. When faced with a confrontation, that self-doubt takes over and your mind goes blank. You want to share what you feel, but the fear of being judged stops you from speaking up. It makes it hard to say what's on your mind in those emotional moments. So, to wrap things up, it's clear that being on the receiving end of narcissistic abuse can mess with someone's emotions in some strange ways. Victims often end up feeling things that seem totally out of place or way too intense. And it's not because they're weak or overly sensitive. It's because their minds have been pushed and pulled in ways most people don't see coming. So, if you or someone you know is dealing with this, remember, these emotional reactions aren't forever. With time, patience, and a solid support system, people can start to untangle those emotions, regain control, and reconnect with their true selves.